Cool. All right. So here we are, 31st of August. Depending on where you are in the world, it's autumn or spring has sprung, I guess. Depends. So yeah, Blair, you have the first item.
Yeah, you guys have seen the announcements on Slack and whatnot. I figured I'd make it official. Everybody, please welcome Dan Mitzi Harris. He will be starting officially tomorrow as the new product designer on Certify, and I believe he's here. Come off mute, put the video on, say hello to the world if you're comfortable doing that. If not, just chat.
Hello world.
There he is, the man,
Where are
the
you based,
legend.
Dan?
Go ahead.
I'm in Barry Island in South Wales, UK.
Not too far away then. We're just across the water in Dunleary in Ireland. So we're actually pretty, as the crow flies, pretty close.
Yes, we are. Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty.
Yeah, looking forward to getting started and work out what's going on tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm working on that, Dan. By the way, Dan is not a new face. He comes to us from Manage, both Import and Optimize, where he was the product designer there. So he's not a new GitLabber. He will, or not supposed to use that term. He's not a new face. He's been here for a little bit, and yeah, I'm super excited.
Awesome. What a great start. All right, we're straight into demos then. Heinrich, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, Deepika is gonna do the demo. We talked about it a bit.
Yeah, sure. Let me share the screen. So is my screen visible?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. So in the last milestone, we introduced the move to the start and move to the end for the boards cards, but then the move to the end was limited only to the fact when all the issues are loaded in the list. But then in this milestone, we are trying to have that action for all the cards. For that, Heinrich has added a backend GraphQL argument to add the list position. So for the starting, we are going to pass the list position 0, and for the end, we're passing list position -1. It's 0 base. So that's what we're trying to do. So there's a catch here that when all the items are not loaded, so it's like kind of a UX thing. So having a demo for this is a great idea. Thanks, Henrik. So when so in the list, when all the items are loaded and we try to move to the end, for example here, then what we're doing is, so move to the start is just basic. You see when you're moving to the start, you should see it visible on the list in the starting, but moving to the end is a little tricky in the part that when all the items are loaded, like if in this case, when at first there's just 10 items are loaded in the list, when I'm moving it to the end, it's just visible that I just moved this number 3 at the end. So sorry, number 16 to the end. So it's just visible. For example, number 3, if I'm trying to move to the end, it's just like, okay, this is visible. But what happens in the case when all the items are not loaded? For example, for the open and the label list, here there are two options: either to show it at once when, even before the next page is loaded, or just remove it from the current visible list. And when you append the next page to the list, it automatically comes from the added list, because the move to end item action has already been done. For example, just to see how it works here is, as you can see, just 10 are loaded. So when I just have like 21, move to the end, it's not there. But then when I load more, it's not dependent on the UI. When I have the next list, it is there. So there were two opinions on the same. Nick had something and Heinrich had something. And I just think that this is the best. It just looks better when we have both the when we see both the use cases, when all the items are loaded, when all the items are not loaded. there are different, like, there can be different points of view and how should we just move, show the actions when there is just one card on the list, or we should just remove it from that as a follow-up, like feedback if you have for these actions. So yeah, that's what we've implemented, and it's just work in progress. The test cases are not done, but it's good to take feedback because boards are like widely used across the team. So any feedback? What do you think?
Am I allowed to like the issue with moving this down to the bottom of the list is that you don't see it, right? What if we do like a notification toast message, like this got moved down, so someone has a confirmation that this worked out?
Yeah, I guess Nick mentioned in the comments. So yeah, that's one of the points. We can do that, yes. But do we also want like to undo that action, because then it will have another action to be called, and just a notification that it's been moved to the end, because we don't like show anything when we move the list, when we drag it, like, yeah, so it's just different there.
Yeah, so toast messages do support undo action, but you're right, like for doing drag and drop movements, we do not show any confirmation. In fact, even when the request fails, the card item basically restores back to its original position, and I think we do show error message
There's an
in
error
the banner
message,
on the
yes.
top. Yeah, yeah. So I think
Yeah.
that's what we have done. We do not show any undo action for drag and drop movements.
Yeah, I wouldn't add the toaster for drag and drop, because when you drag and drop, like you see the outcome, right? Like you don't. It's really only this scenario where you're like moving something to the end of 100 item list, then you can't visibly see that it succeeded. That we're talking about.
Yeah. So do you think it would be better to have an undo action here, or just show the toaster?
I don't think an undo is like strictly required, because you can still like do it. But if we're able to do it, I would say it's nice to have. But I think I mentioned in the issue comments on this, like we would basically have to be like really careful with the logic. Like that toast would have to go away anytime any other list is changed, so that your like undo stack is kind of pristine. Otherwise, you're like trying to move it back to a position that's no longer the same position. So I can see how that could get tricky. I don't think it's like strictly required. I think because users can still, like, it's not destructive, right? You just moved it, you can always move it back. But like it's nice to have if we can do it. Only for the action menu moves, not for drag and drop.
Okay, so I thought about the undo thing, and I was just wondering that the order of the actions, if if there's one action committed before the last one. So for the race condition that Heinrich mentioned, we're already seeing that issue. So, do we make it more tricky? So, I don't know, maybe I'm not sure about adding that here. So yeah, maybe when when we all are in sync that okay, this is how it should work, and we just have more time, maybe I can try implementing that and share it in the next session. But only when at least the major use cases that we have, the reason for which it was implemented is clear, and it's not like confusing for like anyone. Yeah.
Honestly, I would be against undo, because I believe we need undo button for destructive operations. If something is clearly destructed, like list removed or something else. But for moving issues, we also need to preserve the previous position somewhere. And it will be complicated with Vuex, which is current implementation. It will be no easier with Apollo, which is next implementation. So probably let's not undo the move.
Sure. And what about the fact that do we need to have these actions here when there's just one card in the list, or just like remove it, or what? What do you think?
I would say remove.
Okay.
What would you have instead if there's just one action?
Sorry?
If there's just one action, what would you have instead? Or maybe I misunderstood the question. If you have one action in this list, like how do you get to the list?
I think she meant
Uh,
one card in the list. So like the move to start is
Sorry.
nothing.
Okay.
I think.
Uh, yeah, the complication that we've talked about with this is really in like, do you actually have one card in this list, or do you have a filter applied that makes it seem like there's one card in this list, but actually there's like 10 and you're only seeing one? I think if it's actually one, like there's literally nothing else, then it's fine to remove. If it's like filtered, then I would keep it in, because you could like there's technically still like movement possible there. That's like
mhm.
that's like the area where I know you know how complicated that gets, because that's kind of what we've been working through. But yeah, I think it's fine if there's literally just one to hide it.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. So I didn't think of that. So yeah, when we put the filter, and we still might want to move that to the list. Okay. Let me check if that's just a small thing, and then I can check that filter is applied or not, and then add the action, remove the action accordingly. Would just wanted to be clear in the fact that it should be like not be confusing for the user that I'm seeing it once and I'm not seeing again. That's the only reason I'm asking. Yeah. That's it.
There's no harm in keeping it. Like it doesn't really add like clutter or anything. It doesn't do anything technically, but it doesn't it does exactly what you think. It's just that has no actual outcome, right? It moves it to the top. It's already at the top.
Yeah.
Nick, if we get like a lot of feedback that it's confusing, then maybe we could think about it again, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would assume we won't though.
Hopefully. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing is, do we want to have these actions in the closed list? So Henrik mentioned that like maybe yes, there's no need of it, but maybe we can just have a consensus if you want these actions in the closed list or not.
Yeah, the thing with the closed list is like the sorting is actually supposed to be disabled, because if you like try dragging cards there, it gets persisted in the UI, but if you refresh the page, it goes back to like closed ordering, because that's how we order it from the backend. So the idea here is the ideal state is to disable sorting in the closed list, although there's a complication, because even if we disable sorting or like dragging on this list, we still want it to be a drag target, right? You want a card to be dragged to the closed list to close an issue, and it should just go up to the top. So instead of having a card, target like that where you choose which position you wanted, the closed list should be just one drop area or something where you can drop something to the closed list. So it adds some complication. I don't know if there's an existing issue for that, or I don't know. I'm surprised we don't have an issue for it, because you could reorder lists cards in the closed list and then refresh and then it goes back. Yeah, it's broken.
We probably want that list to be a drag target, but because did you say it's ordered by closed at? So it's ordered in reverse by closed at. So the most recently closed will be at the top. So it should be a drag target, but the card should pop to the top of the list.
Right.
Because when you refresh it, it's going to be at the top of the list anyway, right?
Yeah. That's the ideal behavior. But right now you could drag it to somewhere else in the closed list, and then you refresh, it shows up on the top. So it's kind of inconsistent that way. And even just dragging cards within the closed list to change the relative position. I mean, I think it changes the relative position in the backend, but then when you refresh, it's just ordered by closed at, so it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, we should have an issue for that.
You're also going to need to be able to move things out of the closed list to other lists. So like the cards will still be draggable. They'll still be draggable, but like you're talking about only disabling dragging them up and down within the same list. So I mean, it's a little bit complicated.
I guess an easy solution, but not really nice UX, is like when one drags around the closest, it just reverts to the other position or something in the front end. And if one drags to the closest, we just pop it back to the top or something, like a hack. But yeah, it's not the best UX.
Does anyone want to be the DRI for opening that issue?
I will create the issue. I have some like drafted, but I didn't create it yet.
Thanks.
So yeah, so we'll just let it be for now. I don't know. For the actions, is it here?
Yeah, I think it's fine to leave it like that right now and fix it one time when we fix the dragability thing. Okay.
Okay, sure. Sure. Great. I don't think I have any more points. Yeah, that's Henrik, do you have anything else to share?
There's one more comment that Gabe mentioned about continuing to iterate. Would you like to verbalize that? Or
Yeah, I was just curious if we were going to continue to iterate and add the like move to a specific list or position within the list. I know we had designed it, but I know it was technically more difficult. So I just didn't know if we were going to abandon that or tackle it in another iteration.
yeah, actually the backend I did today supports like arbitrary position. So you could pass in 0 for start, -1 for end, and like any specific number for specific position in the list. The only complication here is with filters. So if you add filters to this board, then if you move to position 3, that's different from the unfiltered board position 3, right? So it doesn't take that into account yet, but it's doable if you wanted to.
I was thinking we just ignore filters, but that's just me because I think it's weird when you do include filters, then it's like a different behavior when you have filters on than when you don't. Because like if you ignore filters and filters are active, it will still move to that position, if that makes sense, I would think, relative to everything else that's in the list. But maybe it wouldn't work. I don't know.
Yes, for example, I filter the list and I see like 5 issues, right? And then I move the first one to position 3. So if I were looking at this list, I would assume that it's gonna be between those 5 issues that were filtered, right? But then when it goes unfiltered, you're saying it's position 5 of the unfiltered list, right? So it could be like position 2 in this filtered list or something like that.
Yeah.
You'll run into that with grouping. It'll be a little bit different, but like I know that was one of the things that we talked about when this came up before. It was like, you'd never break the grouping, right, based on the position. I wouldn't think. So it's more like you're moving it within the relative group, but it has some of the same sort of weirdness as filtering, I would guess.
Do we have the chance to put it in front of a small group of users, get some feel on that, or just test it in production? And if we hear feedback, it sounds like something we can target, like a specific question about the applying filters or not applying filter logic in that area.
We could also just hide the option of moving to a specific position when there are extra filters.
I think to Gabe's point, it's kind of weird when you like have different behaviors when there's filters or not. Like that's not something you necessarily like. Grouping is a little bit different. Like I could see hiding it when it's grouped because it like just fundamentally changes the structure and makes like the list target a little bit different. Although I don't really see why you'd have to. I think my bigger question is just on like how many people would use this. I know it's come up before. We've talked about it with at least one customer, and I've seen it requested from other customers as well. But I wonder how many problems like move to start, move to end resolve, because the bigger pain points tend to be I'm at the end of the list because that's where my new items are, and I want to put it at the top of the list. And dragging an item through 50 parts of the list is pretty tedious. But Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty easy to user test some of this and just understand the expectations. I think the next question then is like whether we can actually achieve those expectations through the logic.
For what it's worth, I use it every day when I use Trello, like move to specific positions, because I would sort of order everything. And then if I wanted to maybe say, I want this thing to be third or fourth position, right? I would just, it's just a shortcut to do that, but it's not the end of the world if we don't do it too.
I actually use this currently for prioritizing tech debt and bugs for milestones. And so this allows me to do like a binary sort first. So I can move all the stuff I'm interested in, just move it to the top, everything I'm not interested in, move it to the bottom. And that gives me a rough approximation. And then I'm just trying to drag between like the top 10 items instead of trying to drag like 100 item list, like an item from the bottom all the way to the top, go back to the bottom, drag all the way to the top. Like more being able to like define what position I put it in would be great. But already, like with this, I'm already using it to kind of get a rough approximation and a pretty good approximation of the top, like say top 5 or top 10 items that I want to prioritize for a milestone. So if it helps, I'm happy to be a guinea pig for any testing because I have a real use case.
John, you brought up my point because you were saying top and bottom. I was just wondering, we say start and end, and I'm wondering when should we say start end versus top bottom? And it looks like Nick and there's some points below if y'all want to vocalize.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this earlier, but like there's this distinction of like visible top, like what invisible bottom, like because we only load 10 items at a time, so the actual bottom of the list may not be the end of the list, and if you have filters applied, it may not be the actual top or bottom. I mean, I don't think that's something most users are going to think about, but that was kind of the logic of using start versus top just to try to like nudge a little bit of that behavior. Otherwise, I would say top and bottom like are probably more common. Actually, I don't know. I'm gonna look real quick and see what's most common, but that would be my guess is top and bottom probably.
I guess that could be part of the validation. I saw you write that too. Just
Yeah.
like asking what makes sense. I would assume top and bottom too, but I understand what you're saying as well. The filters are difficult.
Cool. Can we move on to the next demo just in the interest of time?
Yeah.
Sorry, Martin, we skipped a comment by you though. You want to vocalize?
I didn't want to say it anyway.
Fair enough. Okay. Natalia.
Okay, one more boards demo for today. Need to share my screen, and here we go with the boards. These boards are no different in the implementation, or it's actually different in the implementation, no different in terms of UX from our current boards, besides the fact they are half broken. But initially, internal implementation here doesn't involve UX. Probably you all remember that we had a bunch, and we still have a bunch of bugs, where we desynchronized sidebar from the actual issue. So there was quite an interesting bug where you could apply and assign it to this one, switch to the second one, and assign is applied to the second card. And this bug still exists because our sidebar here and our board here use different states, UX and Apollo respectively. This one is used as Apollo client. The whole page has the same state, including sidebar. It allows us to remove around 400 lines of code of interaction between sidebar and the board, which was ridiculous, honestly. And currently it works pretty good on the main functionality. So reordering the lists, opening and fetching the data, moving the cars, and you can see that label is removed here because apparently on issue boards we don't show labels on the label list. On Epic boards we do show label on the label list. I don't know why. That's just some kind of a mismatch in UX. But if I, for example, move this card here, you will see that label appears almost immediately. I want to make it immediate and probably will, but right now it awaits for the request to the backend. That is what is working. Pagination is working. Opening our tricky sidebars is working too, because that's a huge chunk of logic. I was surprised on the front end. The biggest part of the problems right now is for Epic boards, because, and I would like to bring this to the backend because maybe we can simplify this a bit. Because when I move the card here, you can see that I pass variables and there are list IDs from list ID to list ID, and these are just integers. If I try to do the same on the Epic board, and this is going to fail, so moving an issue doesn't work for obvious reasons. Apparently with pass variables, oh, that's also, I'm passing this like that, and it fails because on real board, if I try to move, this would be not IDs, but GIDs. I'm not sure why do we have this difference in format. So I'm trying to pass IDs and my mutation fails, as it should, because it's wrong type. Maybe we could eventually just bring it to the same format. I'm fine with like moving issues to GIDs or moving epics to IDs or whatever, because applying a bunch of front-end logic on top of that, I'm not sure that is a good idea. We just split the logic for the same component, which is board list. But this is, so boards migration is halfway, I would say 50 to 60% in, depends on the scope, because scope of the boards is undefined. It's very large. And I don't even know all the features of the boards. I doubt like anyone knows all the features on the boards and how they should work. We don't have really good description in terms of spec. We have nice user documentation, so what users should expect. But we don't have a specification for boards. So like when the list is highlighted, nobody knows. How do we move? How does it work? Like very unintuitive one they mentioned to Nick is when you move the card, you have on both lists. To open, it's removed from all the lists it's in. So this is something to be implemented with real time. And yeah, the purpose of all this awful refactoring is we want to bring real time to boards. We want to bring subscriptions here. It was discussed with Heinrich too. And in order to do this, we need to change the implementation of the boards. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
I just
Nick,
have the one
yeah.
question around whether this gives us any different opportunities for loading, because the like 10 item at a time scroll load, scroll load, scroll load is like not like my favorite interaction. I don't know if I don't know if the work you're doing like has any impact on that, but I was just curious if that was something we had more opportunities now.
We can do this by user interaction, but without scrolling down all the way to the bottom. So for example, we can start prefetching when user scrolls like maybe 2 issues down, and we start prefetching already. It's just placing of intersection observer. So this is doable. We can prefetch. So we load first 10 and then we load like the second 10 in the background, but it's basically endless possibilities. We can do whatever UX prefers here.
Cool. Okay, good to know.
Gabe, I think you have the next point.
I can keep helping you define like some of the specs and stuff, and Nick's already part of that. So whatever you need to do, if we do want to document it somewhere outside of that comment or that thread that we've been having on the issue, we can do that just so that other team members can look at the single source of truth. The other thing that I would love to see, if we can move away from multiple different types of lists, like mixing, labels with assignees, like it's just it's just sort of weird. And I think the reason why we do it is like we sort of, it's a hack for people wanting swim lanes, like proper swim lanes, where you can have your x-axis is all one type and your y-axis is all like a different type or a different attribute. And I think if we had that, it would sort of negate the need for having to have mixed lists. But if we did want to work towards that, we'd have to like think about how to gracefully do it, because it would break everyone's current list. Like maybe you just prevent it on future lists and then slowly like phase it out over time. I don't know how to approach that, but that's just one thought.
I think it's a good idea. Would require probably not a few milestones, a lot of milestones of work, but it can result in a really nice thing. Okay, I think we don't have any more comments. On to John.
Yeah, cheers. Sorry, you did bring up something there about different IDs in the backend response. Is there something we can do about that? Like, is there an issue to even long term to investigate this? And when you say it's separate IDs, do you mean some of the IDs on issue boards are GIDs and some on Epic boards are not, or vice versa?
That's not on payload. That's on parameters that we pass to the mutation. And if they have different formats, so whenever you move the issue onto the different list, it accepts the ID parameter as an integer. If you try to do this with an epic, it accepts the GID, only the GID. If you try to pass an integer, it just fails. And it would be nice to just have the same format for all the issuable types on the boards. Like, I'm fine with either. If it's GID and it's easier for the backend, fine. If it's ID, still fine. Just the same one, because I don't even understand why do we have different formats there.
I think this is more like a legacy thing before we kind of made it mandatory to use GIDs everywhere. That was kind of like, I think, more recent versus when we started using GraphQL. So yeah, I think it's a legacy thing. The tricky thing here is GraphQL is public API and we can't make breaking changes. So yeah, we'd have to have like a new mutation endpoint and all that stuff to deprecate the old one in 6 months, remove it and all that.
Okay, front end fix, state fix then.
I mean, we probably, eventually want to clean up the backend to accept the same types of IDs to, lessen confusion and all stuff. And regarding the tech, we also have like boards, endpoints and Rails controllers actions that we have to remove, because when we moved to GraphQL boards, these were left behind and like these aren't used anymore. So there's a lot of these kinds of stuff.
Presumably that's true of a few different things in GraphQL then, that before we brought in the rule about using GIDs. So yeah, I mean, if the only solution is like the 6-month deprecation, that's pretty painful. But if there was some other thing we could come up with, like support both for a while and deprecate one and then remove that one, like, I don't know if that's possible, but that would almost be preferable, I think. I don't know if it's possible, because don't we still use the same field name? We use ID, but you're passing a different type.
Different type for issues and epics, because they are different types. So we are free to pass different IDs to them.
I was also going to just say that keeping in mind that epics will hopefully be converted to work items in the not so distant future. So whatever we choose to do, I mean, there'll have to be eventual consistency anyways, because they're going to use the same object model. So however that helps make engineering decisions, just wanted to call that out.
Then they'll presumably use issue boards. Sorry.
Sorry, a hacky way would be to have a union with both inputs, and one is string and one is integer as ID, and then we separate it based on the type. That could work, right?
Yeah, that we could do that as like a, you know, the deprecation stage, and then in 6 months, not support the ID type. So yeah.
Can somebody write that in the agenda and I'll push on with the next item just to keep things moving. Yeah, so I just wanted to give a quick update on the primary deliverable for product planning. We don't have anything to demo yet, but for the benefit of plan stage members who aren't in this team, you might be interested in what we're working on. So the idea is to allow customers to add issues to epics in different groups. You currently can't do this. You can only add issues from the current group hierarchy that the epic is in. So yeah, we have a few things to do. You can read these here. Adding has epic to the GraphQL issue response, that's in review. It also blocks item 2, which is the front end change, to show that in the sidebar widget that the issue has an epic, but you can't see the epic, which is something we haven't had up until now. Then we have to take account of this in epic tree counts and health status popovers, because again, you might see counts but you can't see the epic, and vice versa. Then there are a couple of security fixes. And the interesting thing here is that like we don't normally see community contributors pick up deliverable items, but in this case they have. So we need to keep an eye on this, I guess, and make sure that we're providing enough support, because we intend to actually ship this in 15.4 and it's a priority for us. So yeah, just to draw attention to that. If there's no questions, Nicholas, you can tear on with point D.
Yeah, I'm just curious because we were like talking about boards and like how would epic swim lanes work with this feature? Like, would those issues just show up in another grouping with like you cannot see this epic or something?
That's a great question. I have no idea what happens in that case where, yeah, where you can see the issue, but you can't see the epic. What swim lane? What do you see in the swim lane? We'll have to test that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I guess it's already a problem right now, right? With like confidential epics and such. I don't know what's the behavior right now, but yeah, I guess it's already an existing problem.
Yeah, I don't have a good discussion point. I just wanted to highlight Eugenia's work on the POC to have epics on different hierarchies. And I saw a few discussions in the spike issues that she brought up about not being able to use like current optimizations for permissions, because you now have an epic that could have issues like from multiple groups outside of the group that is in right now. So I don't have the full knowledge on this, so I'm trying to get up to speed on this. But I was thinking, like, is it possible for us that we have like constraints or assumptions about a permission model that we can use to optimize and not check every group separately? It's more like a question into the room. I'm not, Eugenia knows more about this, and so I don't want to steal the show there, but want to bring it up as a food for thought.
I was just getting, not an engineer, but I was just thinking that when I thought about this before, I don't think we sort of made the decision that some of the roll-up data, like counts and things like that, is if we don't have to hide those for confidential issues because we're not exposing anything confidential. And I wonder if you could do basically one query when you load the epic tree that just loads all the roll-up data, but then you don't you don't do like the full permissions check for that. But then once you basically unfurl one of the epics within the tree, you do the permission checks for the next layer down. So you're just running on a smaller subset of the overall permissions. I can say from watching one customer, I think the epic tree had, I think, over 1,000 epics in it, spanning probably several hundred groups and projects. So it's definitely worth thinking about the performance stuff now. And the other thing I was going to say is maybe check with Alex Pooley in Workspace, because he did a lot of work around traversal queries for namespaces, which is a very much more performant way to check access than what we were doing before. So maybe we're somebody we could bounce some ideas off of.
Yeah, Felipe actually used those in some of his optimizations, and it was quite incredible, the difference. I mean, with a certain large customer, we were seeing 60-second just to load the epics list for that customer at the top level. We were seeing 60-second request times and then timeout. And those same queries now take like between 1 and 2 seconds. Like still quite long for a request duration, but given how complex and like this is, we're talking like 99.9th percentile, like a pretty incredible increase. So those are useful. I think like we need to look at each use case, like you pointed out. I don't anticipate that listing epics is going to be slow. But what is slow? Like, is it like if you're looking at an issue, like we just have to check that epic that it's attached to. I guess it's the epic tree then that's a problem, Nicholas, is it? Like if you have a lot of epics or a lot of issues in the epic tree, that we have an n+1 there or something.
I think
sorry.
I think he means epics under epics or issues under epics. I think if he means the one I'm working on, is the epic tree would display the epics, the child epics, and every epic could belong to a different group. So if we belong, we're checking only the epic group and the ancestors and descendants. Now we will check those for the parent epic, if there is any epic in there, but also we can have every epic could be from a different group. So for every epic, we have to check the parent group and the ancestors and descendants. So the optimization from Felipe helps, but the query is still quite slow. I think there might be options. I don't think it's impossible. I tried with 10 groups and it was around 200 milliseconds. I also mentioned that maybe we wanted to consider a limit of the groups we can have in these trees, but I don't know if that's a problem for the client.
I think we can consider a limit. I'll look to you all to tell me what you think is a good limit, and then I can ask.
We already have a constant. Sorry.
Go on.
We already have a limit, right? For epics. Virginia, you mentioned something.
Yes, the limit is for how deep the sub epic can go. I don't remember the limit, but if it was 10, you can have the limit is in the ancestors. So you would have one child that has another child, that has another child, has another child. But all of these cases at the moment are all in the same group or ancestors or descendants. So that's limiting the number of groups. By introducing this option, we open the number of groups to whatever. Either we can limit the amount of sub-epics we can have in an epic. I don't know if that would be welcome. Or, for example, if you're adding a new epic and you already have 10 different groups in your child epics, it might say you reach the level of, well, different groups you can add as a sub-epic. Or I think that could be a limiting factor, but if the client doesn't have a use for having many groups in child epics, it would help a lot with performance.
We don't have a limit on the number of sub-epics you can have.
I don't think so, but it could be.
We probably should have one.
I think there is a limit.
patient.
It was 7, and within that, I think we changed it to maybe 9 or 10. I can't
That's
remember.
higher.
No, that's a depth.
The depth.
Yeah, it's limited at 7, but there's no limit on the number of sub-epics an epic can have. They're just paged, I think.
Yes.
They're paged at 100 or something.
they are paged, but in this case, even if we display them paged, we're going to collect all the groups and check the permissions, because we're not checking permissions for each child epic. We're checking their groups, and because you can inherit permissions from another group. So just checking the epic or checking the group doesn't help. So we're going to collect all the groups. It could be 200. And then we're going to look into all their ancestors and descendants and check the permissions in each of them. So that's basically the problem at the moment.
And we have to check their projects as well, right? Because they may have inherited membership through the project currently.
Or through group shares.
Yeah, I think that's being done already in the, because this is doing the same as Epics Finder, but limiting, removing the, well, the collection of groups will be different, but the checks for the groups permissions would be the same. It's just a much bigger sample of groups. But yeah, we're going to do what we're doing now in a larger sample of groups.
We have some questions in the chat.
Yeah, we're having a side conversation. So Donald wrote that he thinks the epic tree only shows the first 100 child epics. So then my question is like, then how would you see 101? So I think there might be an open, maybe I'll start an issue and we can investigate this and implement a limit if we need one. Does that sound good? All right, I'll take that as a yes.
I already assigned it to you, so yeah, thanks. So far, I've avoided creating any issues in this meeting. It's awesome. Just assign them to other people. Okay, cool. So we can follow up after the meeting for that one. Any other items before we have 1 minute left, if anyone would like to raise anything? Nothing? Cool.